أعوذ بالله الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم ربي اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. So, in our lesson today, we shall be basically talking about the legal environment of business. So, today and tomorrow, we shall be talking in detail about the legal environment of business. And when you're talking about the legal environment, we are talking about issues related to business law. Remember, when a business is operating, it operates in an environment, and this environment has policies, rules, and regulations that actually manages the business. So, today and tomorrow, we shall be talking in detail about this environment and the law that governs this environment. But just a recap of what we did last week. Last week, we were focusing with the healthcare ethics. We defined what healthcare ethics is, and then we also talked about the objectives of healthcare ethics, the importance, and we also talked about the scope of healthcare ethics. Now, as we start our lesson today, these are our lesson objectives. So by the end of this lesson, the learner should be able to, number one, define business law and explain its role in business activities, describe the scope and main sources of business law, explain the legal environment of business and its importance, analyze the relationship between law, ethics, and business, okay? Then explain the functions of law in society, describe the structure of the legal system, distinguish between civil and criminal liability, then explain the alternative dispute resolution mechanisms and compare them with litigation. Then lastly, outline the main stages of the litigation process. So this is what we shall be covering in our lesson today. Okay, so the first thing, as usual, is we always begin our lessons with definitions of concepts. When we are talking about the legal environment of business, you are basically talking about business law. Now, what is the meaning of business law? So, business law refers to the body of laws. Body of laws means that there are many laws. That is why it is a body, as we shall see later. So it refers to the body of laws that govern commercial activities. Commercial is another word for business. Okay, commercial activities, business transactions. When you're talking about business transactions, we are talking about buying, selling, giving loans, so this is what is meant by business transaction, and most importantly, the relationships between individuals and organizations engaged in trade and commerce. So in a nutshell, when we are talking about business law, it is basically rules, regulations that govern business activities or commercial activities. And these activities can be between individual and individual, because maybe individual A is doing business with individual B. So in this case, maybe they're signing a contract. So we're going to have the contract law. Or maybe it is between an individual and a business or an organization. So this business law provides legal rules that guide how businesses are formed, operated, and dissolved. This is very important. So the business law determines how businesses are formed. Today, if you want to start business, how are you going to start it? How are you going to start a business in Somali? For example, if you want to start a business, you have to go to apply, you have to get a license, you have to get a permit. There are a lot of things that are involved when you want to form a business. Operated, how are these business operating in Somali, for example, there are rules that govern businesses in Somali and dissolve. For example, if you decide today we want to dissolve our business, then what are the processes that are involved? Also, it also regulates agreements. Agreements means contracts. So in business, we normally have contracts between people. So this business law, it determines these contracts. Or employment relationship. You have the employer and you have the employee. So there is a law that governs this relationship. Then consumer protection. There is a law that ensures that businesses always produce goods and services that does not harm the customers and consumers. Then lastly, dispute resolution. If a company A is having an issue with company B, then how is it going to go about? So there needs to be a law that is going to govern all these kinds of relationship and activities. So for example, a sales contract between a wholesaler and a retailer is governed by business law to ensure both parties honor their obligations. So here we have a contract between a wholesaler and a retailer. So business law comes into place to ensure that each one of them, okay, honor their obligation and honor their commitment. So that is in brief what is meant by business law. Now, the scope of business law, when you are talking about scope, think of it about al-majal, al-hudud. So what is the scope? What is the scope? And you can also think of scope as the areas that business law covers. So the scope of business law refers to what? The range of legal areas that affect business operation. So there are a lot of legal areas. And when you're talking about the legal areas, these are always the areas where conflicts always arise. And as such, most of the time, there needs to be a determination in a court of law or by using law. So these are the scope or the areas. Business law covers several fields, such as number one, contract law, al-uqud. Okay, so contract law, basically, as we shall see tomorrow, I think, when you're talking about contract law, we have different types of contracts. For example, if you want to go to a shop today to buy a laptop, then there is going to be a contract between the buyer and the seller. So you as the buyer, you have your rights and you have your obligations. Then on the flip side, the seller also has rights and obligations. My obligation is to pay money for the laptop, to give the specification for the laptop. Once I pay, then the seller on the other side has to do what? Has to give me the laptop. If he does not do that, then there can be some implication. And there are different types of contract. The contract can be written, it can be oral, it can be implied, as we shall see tomorrow. Then we have company law. For example, today you have a group of 4 or 5 people. They want to open a company. How are they going to start it? So in each and every country, there is a company law. Sometimes they are called corporate laws. They are the ones that determines and guides people in matters related to opening a company. Partnership law, if you want to do a business between 2 or 3 more people, if you enter into a partnership, then there are some laws that guide that. Then you have the employment law. Before you work in any company, you always have to sign a contract. Then you have the intellectual property law. When you're talking about the intellectual law property, sometimes as a business, you have your brand, you have your trademark, you have your patent. So this law ensures that people don't copy your brand. Because if they copy your brand, you can take them to a court of law and say, this is my idea. Why are they using it? Then consumer protection law. These are laws that are there to protect the consumers, to protect the customers, because sometimes maybe they can buy a product and maybe the product is not in good condition. So there needs to be a law that governs them, you know. So an example is labor laws. Every country has labor laws regulating working hours. So in each and every country, employees have the working hours from, for example, 7 to 5 إلى غير ذلك. And employee wages, the minimum, what is the minimum salary, for example, in Somalia? So we have the labor law. It is the one that determines and regulates. So if you go to work in a place and they're paying you below, you know, the minimum wage, you can take them to a court of law. Now, let us go to, so we are through with the business law and the scope of business law. Now, when you are talking about the legal environment of business, what do we mean? So the legal environment of business is the framework of law. When you are talking about framework, we are talking about haikal. So it is the framework of laws, regulations, al-qawanin, institutions, muassasat, and judicial decisions that influence business activities. So when you're talking about judicial decisions, sometimes businesses, when they have issues, they take their issues to the court of law. So what the court of law decides can be used as a source of law. So if anything happens, we can use the judicial decision as a source. Now, businesses operate within a legal system. So businesses, they operate within a legal system made up of what? Legislature. You know, when you are talking about the legislature, think about legislature as maybe the parliament, because the parliament always passes the laws that guides, that regulates everything in the country. That is the legislature. Because in every country, you normally have three arms of the government. We have the legislature, we have the judiciary, and we have the executive. So the legislature is the one that drafts laws. Then number two, we have the courts. The courts, now this is the judiciary. If you have an issue, then you can go to the courts to report. Then we have the regulatory agencies. When you're talking about the regulatory agencies, think, for example, as the traffic departments. So that is just but an example. So think of it as the traffic department. That is an agency that enforces law. So in terms of business, you can think of the regulatory agencies, for example, like Bureau of Statistics, you know, ila ghayri dhalik, that creates and enforce law. Now, an example is a government licensing authority that approves business registration, is part of the legal environment of business. So, in each and every country, before you open a business, you have to go to the local authority. So the local authority, the local authority will, number one, give you a license, and two, it will allow you, the license will allow you to operate, you know, but without being registered, actually, you cannot operate. And if they find you operating without the license, then they can take you to a court of law. Then you can also be arrested. So what you have to ensure is that if you have any idea, you want to open a business, understand what are the requirements before you start that business. So it's very important. Now, the sources of law. Now, when we are talking about the sources of law, like in Arabic, this is what is known al-maswadir al-qanun. ما هي المصادر القانون? What are the sources of law? For example, in Islam, what are the sources of law in Islam? Number one, Quran. So we have to refer. So it is the sources of reference. If there is any problem as Muslims, we refer to the Quran. قال Allah, what does Allah say in the Holy Quran? Al-halal wal-haram. Now, if it is not clear in the Holy Quran, maybe, then we can refer to the hadith. Then if the hadith maybe needs some more explanation, then we can go to the ijma. Then if the ijma is not satisfactory, then you can go to qiyas. So these are the sources of law in Islam. Now, talking about business law, they also have sources. If there is any problem in business, what is our source? Al-marja'iyah. Where should we go? So sources of business law are the origins. Origins means al-masdar. Origins from which business-related laws are derived. That is where do we get, where do we get the laws? What is the source of the laws that governs business? Now, they include constitution and dastur. If every country, they have a constitution. In the constitution, it is very clear if you want to manage your business, if you want to open a business. So there are some rules, there are some acts, there are some binding articles in our constitution. Then number two, statutes. Statutes are the acts of parliament. So even the parliament has the authority, that is the legislature. Sometimes it can make rules and regulations that govern the business. Then number three, judicial precedents. This is what I was telling you, court decisions. So the court decisions, sometimes the courts, they can decide in case, for example, the case of Muhammad and Khadija. This is what the court decided. So when you go to a court, they will refer to the decision that was made, for example, last year. Okay, this case resembles the Khadija Muhammad case. So because it resembles that, then that is now a law. We are going to apply it. Then we have administrative regulation. Administrative regulation, these are the local government. In the countries, we have the local governments. So the municipalities, so they can also make rules and regulations that govern business. In fact, most of the rules that govern business, they are administrative in nature. Now, and we have international agreement. International agreement, now, this is what governs business at an international or regional level. For example, regionally, we have the East African Community. So when you're talking about the East African Community, these are business laws that govern any business happening between the countries in East African Community. The African Union, and also we have the World Trade Organization. Now it manages businesses, it determines business law at an international level. Now, for example, a court decision setting a rule for breach of contract becomes a legal precedent for future cases. Now, law and business environment. Ma hiya al-alaka? Are they related in any way? Law and business environment. And when we are talking about business environment, we are talking about there are two environments. We have the internal business environment and we have the external business environment. So when you're talking about the internal business environment, it is your relationship with the people who are working inside your organization, your employees, your managers inside the organization. And when you're talking about the external business environment, we are basically talking about your relationship with the government, your relationship, for example, with your suppliers, ila ghayri dhalik. So this refers to the interaction between legal rules and business activities. Al-alaka bayna hadhihi what? The legal rules, al-qawanin, and business, al-anshita tijariya. So laws regulate how business competes. Number one, it's very important. So for example, in each and every country, we have laws that are governing competition. How do you compete? Because you have to compete in a legal way. If you are not competing in a legal way, then the law comes into place. For example, you are monopolizing products. So al-ihtikar, people can just go and actually do what? They can just go and take you to a court of law. Then advertise. There are some laws that are governing advertisement, because when you are advertising, you are responsible for what you are marketing or advertising. Some people, they normally exaggerate in their marketing that our product, mashallah, it is having 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. But in real sense, the advertisement are misleading just because they want people to buy their product. That's haram. You are misleading your consumers. You are misguiding your customers. Then hire employees. How do you hire employees? You know, there is a process. You need to follow the law when you're hiring the employees. And protect consumers. There are laws that are there to do what? To protect the consumers, thereby shaping business behavior. So, because the business, they need to behave, they're just like human beings. Us as human beings, we have rules and regulations that are actually shaping our behavior. So even the businesses, they have rules, they have laws that guide their behavior. So businesses should not misbehave. If they misbehave, they can be taken to a court of law. So an example is competition law prevents monopolies. Monopolies is when one business tries to monopolize products, you know, at the expense of the others, and promote fair market practices. When you're talking about fair market practices, is that anybody can enter the market, you can buy, you can sell. So al-iqtisad al-hurr, an open market where the demand and supply determines the prices, you know. Now, legal risk in business. So when you are operating in this business environment, هناك المخاطر تتعلق بالقانون. So there are legal risk in business. So the legal risk is what normally happens when the businesses misbehave. When businesses don't want to follow rules and regulations, then the legal risks come into play. So legal risk is the possibility of loss. Ihtimal. So it is the possibility of loss or liability. Why? Due to failure to comply with the laws and regulation. So these are the laws. Your business can get loss or liability when you fail to follow the rules and regulations of the country. You know? Now, number one, businesses may face fines. So sometimes you can be fined by the local government. They come while they are supervising and monitoring, and they find that your license has expired. You are operating your business, but your license is expired. Or, on the contrary, maybe you don't have a license in the first place. You can be fined. Then number two, lawsuits. Lawsuits means somebody can take you to a court of law. For example, today, if I come to your shop and I buy a product and the product is not in good condition, and I bring it back to you and say, no, you know, the product was okay, but I know very well the product was not in good condition, I can sue you. I can take you to a court of law because I will need compensation. Or reputational damage if they violate legal obligations. So when you're talking about reputation damage, it is what is known as a sum'ah. So sometimes when you don't follow the rules and regulations, what happens is that you are going to have a negative image in the society. And when your business is having a negative image, you are going to lose customers. And when you are going to lose customers, you are going to lose sales. And when you lose sales, your profit is going to go down, decline. And when your profit declines, then your business is going to collapse because you are bankrupt. So following the rules and regulation is very important. So for example, if a company that ignores safety regulation may be sued if an employee is injured. So we have some companies where employees are working, and sometimes when employees are working, they need to be protected. So, for example, we have companies, the construction companies, the engineers, the plumbers, the carpenters, they need to be protected. They need to wear the helmets, they need to wear the overalls. So sometimes you find that some employers, they don't provide the safety, clothes and equipment. So if something happens in the site, you can be taken to a court of law because of your negligence. Now, on to another point. Now, what is the relationship between law and ethics? Remember in our first lesson, when we were talking about business ethics, we actually gave the difference between law and ethics. And we said that when you are talking about law, they are written rules and regulations that guides the behavior of people, and they are enforceable. The government can force you to follow the law. But when you're talking about ethics, they are not enforceable. Nobody can force you. These are things, behavior that are natural, and it is actually advisable to. So law refers to enforceable rules made by the states. So enforceable basically means if you don't follow, you are going to be arrested. If you don't follow, you are going to be taken to a court of law by the government. While ethics, on the other side, are moral principles that guide behavior. So that is the difference between the two. And as we said earlier, not all unethical actions are illegal, and not all legal actions are ethical. So ethical standards often go beyond legal requirements, So not all unethical actions are illegal. Sometimes some things are unethical, but they are legal, and not all legal actions are ethical. And this thing, I think I explained it in our first lesson. So, mathalan, overpricing essential goods during a crisis may be legal, but ethically wrong, So sometimes when the economy is not doing well, what happens? The sellers, they increase the prices of goods and services. So it is legal. It is legal for them to increase the prices, but it is ethically wrong. Akhlaqiyan, it's not good. But but in terms of what? It is legally okay. Like in akhlaqiyan, it's not right because you have to be considerate. Now, law, ethics, and business practices. So if we put these three things together now, so this concept explains how legal compliance and ethical behavior jointly influence business conduct. So business conduct is not just about laws, no, but it is also related to ethics. So law and ethics. So when you are doing your business, you are expected to do what? You are expected to follow the law and at the same time act ethically. Why? To maintain trust. If you want people to trust you, then you have to follow the law and be ethical. Then repetition, if you want your repetition to be good. And if you want long-term success. So long-term success is correlated to following the laws and being and acting ethically. If you don't do that, then in the short run, you might be successful. But in the long run, you are not going to make it. Now, for example, a company that complies with environmental laws and voluntarily reduces pollution demonstrate ethical responsibility. We have companies, many good companies, that are cognizant to the environment. they have or they put in place all measures to ensure that the environment is safe and secure. But there are some companies that don't care about the environment. They don't care about polluting the air, polluting the land, polluting the water, إلى غير ذلك. So they're being unethical. Now, what is the function of law now in society? Like, why do we establish laws? Why do we need laws? Are they important in our societies? So, functions of law are the roles law play in, number one, regulating society, and number two, maintaining order. So these are the key roles of law. So number one, regulating society. You can imagine a society without rules and regulation. What is going to happen? It's going to be chaotic. It's going to be fawdawiya, where people do la mubala, people do whatever they want. So that is why as Muslims we even have the Quran and Sunnah. Quran says this is halal and this is haram. Al halal bayyin wal haram bayyin. So this is to regulate us. قال Allah this لا افعل لا تفعل. So that is what the law actually does. And also it maintains order. Order means peace. So people who, for example, go against the law, they can be arrested. They can be taken to court of law. And after that, they can be taken to jail and they'll face their prison terms. So law are there to protect rights. If you feel that somebody has infringed your rights, then you can take that person to a court of law. Number two, to resolve disputes. Surah adds sometimes when the relationship between two people are toxic, or if the relationship is not that good, we can go to a court of law and they can help us actually to find a solution. Then law also enforces obligation. Enforces obligation basically means if I buy a product in your shop, and the product is not in good condition and I gave you the money, the law can enforce, hey, please give Muhammad a good laptop again. Take this old one, So laws are there to enforce obligation, And lastly, promotes justice and fairness. So the laws are there to ensure that hunaka al-adala, that each and every person gets his or her rights, Now, for example, commercial courts resolve dispute between business partners. Sometimes you have situation, for example, where people, they have invested together, maybe in partnership or maybe in cooperation, they have invested. And then issues arises related to shares or related to ownership or related to investment. So if they're having issues, or maybe one person wants to leave the business and he wants his or her rights, then they can go to a commercial court, and the commercial court will actually help, Now, importance of business law to entrepreneurs and managers, So when you are talking about, because we have a key word here, we have an entrepreneur and we have a manager. So in an exam, you can be asked, what is the difference between an entrepreneur and a manager? Are they the same or they're different? So the answer to that is that entrepreneur and managers, they are not the same. When we are talking about an entrepreneur is somebody who seeks for a business opportunity by taking risk. While a manager, on the other side, is somebody who manages an already established business. So a manager manages something that is already there. Manager of Telesom, Dahabshil, Premier Bank. So you are a manager, you are managing a business for somebody. But an entrepreneur, the person who started Dahabshil Bank is the entrepreneur. the person who started it from zero, the owner of the Habshil is the entrepreneur. But the people, the manager, the people who are working there, they are managers, basically. They are managing something that is already established. Now, so what is the importance of this business to the entrepreneurs and managers? So business law provides entrepreneurs and managers with legal guidance for decision making and risk management. Remember, I told you managers, they make decisions. Entrepreneurs, they take risk. So the law helps the managers, because if you are the manager of any company, every day you are going to make decisions related to employment, decision related to productions, decision related to marketing, decision related to sales. So every day the managers are making a lot of decisions. But ma hiya al-marja'iyya, before I make the decision, I have to consult the law. I have to see what the law is saying. Why? Because if I do any mistake, I might find myself in danger. So that is why the law helps the manager. So if you are managing a business, you have to be very good in law. Very good in law. If you are not good in law, find a lawyer. That is why some businesses, they always have their lawyer. They consult before they make the decision. They go to their lawyer. Okay, we want to do this. What should we do? Can you guide us? But if you just decide to do your things, Ashwaia, so we'll continue the lesson after the break. We have the last part remaining. So I will send another link after this link goes off. So we'll have the second part of the lesson. But before the links goes off, so we have the decision-making part. Then number two, the risk management. So as an entrepreneur, of course, you're going to have you're going to take a lot of risk. So the law is going to guide you actually, so that you only take risks that are manageable.